Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Roger. And thank you all for being here. Yeah. So I would love to introduce Dr. Dorothy Martin Neville, and she is a lot of many magical things, some of which are speaker, author, consultant, master coach. She's frequently been on radio and television. She's appeared in 9 different countries. She's been featured on the OWN as well as the New York Times, the Huffington Post, NBC, ABC. She's also the past president of the National Speakers Association and on the advisory board of various organizations. She is a psychotherapist with a practice for 25 plus years. She's also a past clinical instructor at the University of Connecticut Medical School, a co-chair of the advisory board of a multi-million-dollar NIH grant, and the recipient of the NIH grant funding to research her work. She's a pioneer in CAM in the United States, and her studies in energy medicine, advanced acupressure, reflexology, iridology, Jin Shindo, and a total of 9 modalities, combined with her knowledge and experience as a psychotherapist, has really resulted in the creation of her own methodology, which she taught at her institute, the Institute of Healing Arts and Sciences, for 19 years. And tonight she's going to be sharing with us and discussing how your personality can really impact your health. And with that, Dr. Dorothy, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. And Roger had told me not to expect anybody to ask any questions, but in case somebody wants to be outrageous, I would love it. If anything comes up, just raise your hand and however you choose to do that, digitally or just physically raise it, because I want to answer any questions that pop up because we never know what's going to show up. And I love this work, so I could just keep talking literally for hours. My school was a 4-year program, so I could talk for 4 years, but we'll keep it short and simple tonight. But what I wanted to start off with was just an overview of energy itself. And from my perspective, everything in life is about energy. Because even those who say they don't understand energy, you feel it when somebody walks in a room. They shift the energy in a room. Somebody walks into a room in rage, instantaneously, and everybody reacts defensively or shifts and changes. Somebody walks in laughter, especially you see a young child in laughter, and immediately changes the energy in the room. So energy is something we all live with on a regular basis, even if we don't recognize that we've got that level of awareness. But when you go into most stores and you look at energy, what you usually see is the chakras, which are the most superficial level of energy vibration. And they are deeper than what most people are aware of because every chakra has an emotional, spiritual, and physical implication. And for those, or anybody who don't know what I'm talking about, is this brand new for anybody? Because if it is, I'll go into much more detail. But, when you look at the emotional, spiritual, and physical elements of the chakras, they're all impacted by our personality. The deepest level of energy is in the soul seat, and that's between the pubic bone and the navel. And that's considered where, if you will, the umbilical cord to the Akashic records, to the book of knowing exists. And that is really the deepest level. My teachings have shown me that the reason we are here, the reason we have incarnated at this time, is to really learn to live from the essence of who we are. And so when we begin to recognize that we all create defenses, and that's what we'll be talking about tonight. We all create wounds and defenses as we live this journey. But we're called to live from the essence of who we are. It's not what most of our culture tells us. Most of our culture wants us to live in defense. It wants us to become who they believe we should be, whether that means living down to a level or living up to a level, rather than acknowledging who we are. And the second level, the second, if you will, more superficial level, is the Hara line, Hara. And in the Hara line, if you notice, when we travel on the highway and you see a ray of energy, a ray of light coming through the clouds, it's really an energetic formation of the universal energy field. And about 1.5 to 2 feet above your head, that energy field of the universal energy field becomes the human energy field. And this is where we are all connected. We are all being fed by the universal energy field. And that comes in, as you know, and I'm sure you've seen it, whether you look at the clouds and you see a ray of sun coming through, that universal energy field enters through the crown of your head, which is why the crown is there when a child is born. And that doesn't close until much later in your life, how many months later, depending on the child. But the universal energy field becomes the human energy field, enters through the crown, goes down to the solar plexus at the top of your rib cage. And that really becomes where all of your longings for this particular lifetime exist. If you notice right at the top of your rib cage, this solar plexus area, that is really where your longings for this lifetime exist, which is why some people will say, my heart longs for. And that longing is deeper than your heart. It's really your life's purpose, your life intention, what your purpose is this journey. It's right there. And then you go down again to the soul seed I spoke to you about, and then down through into the earth, so that we are both yin and yang. We are the energies of the Father and energies of Mother Earth that intertwine almost like a braided rope inside our bodies in the heart line. And then most superficially are the chakras. And I share that with you because the superficial level is the chakras, and then the heart line, then the core essence. And if you look at the chakras being the most superficial, it's because they're what's impacted by our personality. As a child, we come in with a core wound. For some of us, it is, I'm not good enough. I'll never be good enough. I'll never be smart enough. I'll never be worthy, whatever our core wound is. And that becomes the filter through which we see the world. And if your core wound is, I'm not good enough, or I'll never belong, what ends up happening is I'll never belong. You go to work in an office or someplace, and everybody invites you to dinner, but your belief is they really don't want you there. They're just inviting you because they feel sorry for you, because you can't accept that people actually want you. You belong in that community. So that becomes the filter through which you see the world. And when you believe you don't belong, you're going to see it everywhere. Somebody walks by you, it doesn't say hello, you know they don't want to, because you interpret it rather than they're caught up in their own little world at the moment and they don't see you. And so that belief system that I don't belong, they don't see me, they don't want me here, gets fed again and again and again. And we keep recreating wounds. And that impacts our health, that impacts everything about us. And so this is really just an overview to show you that how we see the world impacts how we experience it. If we believe we'll never be right, we'll never be good enough, everything we experience in the world affirms that for us. And my hope is to help change that for you so you can begin to see it very differently. I'm going to share my screen now. Roger had said, do up a PowerPoint because people are going to be frightened of asking questions. So do a PowerPoint and they can follow. So that's what I will do for you. And clearly this whole piece right here is how your personality impacts your health. And honestly, what I put together, I've taught this for 19 years at my school. And many of my students were physicians, nurses, occupational therapists, massage therapists, and so forth. But some were folks who wanted to become healers. There were numerous Reiki masters who came to study with me because it was a 4-year program. And the 3rd and 4th year students in my school were required to do medical internships. And because they flew in from around the country in Canada and Australia and other places to study with me, they could do their medical internships in whatever country or state they lived in. And so it really provided a broad experience of what all this does. And it really is looking at how your emotional and spiritual beliefs impact your physical health. So here we go. As I said earlier, everything in life is energetic. Your emotions. Some people are going to look at this picture of this baby crying, and their heart is going to feel compassion. Somebody else is going to look and feel annoyed that there's a whiny little brat in the corner and they don't really want to be bothered. But always our emotions govern how we see the world, and your feelings, which are very different than emotions. I can feel hurt at something. I can feel glad when I see something. I look at a baby and my heart just opens. I just want to pick him up and hold him if he's crying, right? Our thoughts impact it. As a psychologist and as a business coach, of which I am now a business coach, what what happens is our thoughts create our reality. If I know I'm not good at what I'm supposed to be doing, we lower our expectations for our performance. We lower our expectations for what we're capable of achieving. If I know that anything is possible, I'm going to go out and make it happen. And I share that with you because my story briefly is I was raised in an orphanage, and later I was adopted by an Irish alcoholic policeman and raised in the housing projects of the inner city in Boston and South Boston, and was taught that being an illegitimate child, being unwanted, that I would never amount to anything. And coming from the housing projects, also told that I would never amount to anything. And when we believe the messages people give us, we start creating stories around that and limit ourselves. When we change the stories we tell ourselves, we change our energy patterns. And when we do, we change our health. Cellular memory, which is very much energetic, that is everything that has ever happened to you, literally from the moment of conception. Every thought, every feeling, every emotion, every experience you have had from the moment of conception is in your cellular memory. Years ago, we were taught that memory is in the brain. What we know now is that every cell of your body contains every memory you ever possessed, which is why when we look at transplant surgery, we oftentimes receive blood infusions if you're having surgery and there's a problem. But now that we do transplants of whole organs like a heart or a lung, you are taking in a world of memory that belongs to somebody else. One of my students required to read a book. It's called The Change of Heart. It's out of print. You can buy it as a used book. It talks about the woman who had the first heart lung transplant in the United States. What ended up happening is she was a high-level ballerina that traveled the world as a ballerina and had always lived at five-star, stayed at five-star resorts, five-star hotels, and lived the best life, ate the best foods, because as a ballerina, she needed to be in the best health. But what ended up happening for her, she was born with a heart and lung disorder, and it was in her 50s that she was required to have surgery. And what happened after surgery for her was she started having dreams of running down a football field and making a touchdown. She started craving chicken McNuggets. She wanted to go on a bicycle. She wanted to go camping in the woods. And her friends were saying she was having a breakdown after her surgery. And so she went into therapy and started working with a psychologist who said, "You're perfectly healthy. I don't think that's the problem." So she decided to go back and research who died, because at that point you could not find out who donated an organ to you. So she went back to research who passed away within 24 hours of her surgery. This was in Boston, Massachusetts. And she found out that she received her heart lung from a teenage boy in Maine. And when he graduated from high school, he and two other friends all worked two jobs to save money to go backpacking throughout Europe. And this boy was killed. He was riding his motorcycle home from work with a box of chicken McNuggets inside his leather jacket. And he was going home, going to his house to eat his dinner. And chicken McNuggets was his favorite meal. And he was the football star in high school. And so her memories were now about running down the field, making a touchdown, being congratulated, and winning awards for football, which wasn't her life story. But she had to then go into therapy and learn how to deal with some of these memories that were so foreign to her. And yet they were now a part of her reality because she took in this man's memories, she took in his life experience, which was now a part of her own. And it really is an adjustment. And Bernie Siegel, who many years ago started First Cancer research, he did a lot of support groups for people with cancer. And he then at this point decided to open up a support group for people who were receiving transplants. And I did work with plan in the hospital. Some of my students, we worked with students with patients who were getting transplants. And what was happening is when people were rejecting an organ, rejecting something they received in transplant surgery, we had to look and see what was that about. And oftentimes, if they were racist and they started craving Black American foods or hearing Black American music, they ended up rejecting the organ because they didn't want that blood, they didn't want that in their bodies. And we really, and I'm not saying everybody who rejects it, it's that reason, but we found out there was a correlation between not liking the memories they were getting and the rejection of this. It's really absolutely fascinating to me how our mind can have our body reject a complete organ when there is no reason for the body to reject it. I have broken it up into 5 different personality styles. All of us have all 5 of these personality styles, but we have them in different proportions. Some of us are going to have 40% of something or 30% of something and maybe 5% of another as I go through this. And recognize there is absolutely no right and no wrong, no good and no bad. This is just an understanding of our personalities and how, as we live them, they impact us emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And I have done decades of research on this. There are numerous books out. I've written 8 books. One of my books is Your Soul Sings, Your Body Dances. It goes into what I'm going to talk about tonight into far greater detail. But this is one of the first personality constructs. This develops at the time of utero or birth, either within utero or at birth. And when there is a difficult birth or a difficult pregnancy, the child may create this personality style, and they come in with a wound in which the world is a very unsafe place. These folks are very creative, they're very intellectual, and they also are very sensitive in that they can feel when an energy is shifting in the room. They had a very different experience of the solar eclipse than some other people who just thought it looked pretty. They felt the energetic shifts, they felt energetic changes that take place. They are far more sensitive to energies. These people are also extremely perceptive. They can look at you and see many things, not just your physicality. They are very perceptive of how people are feeling and what's going on around them. They also tend to be highly spiritual. The Dalai Lama, people of that nature, Mother Teresa, very spiritual people. They're very strong. And this has nothing to do with religion, but a very spiritual foundation to who they are. Oftentimes they are psychic because they can talk between the veils. They talk between the worlds with those on the other side. They can be extremely brilliant. My dad used to say all the time, he's very smart, but he doesn't know a thing, which meant that somebody was highly intelligent, but they didn't know how to live in the physical world. They were confused by pretty much everything in the physical world, and yet they were highly intelligent people. And this becomes that reality. They are very innovative thinkers, so they have so much to offer to us. These are the artists. These are the dancers. These are Albert Einstein. These are the creators, the inventors that make things happen. They are our dancers, our musicians, very spiritual, very energetic, and very creative. What happens is that this is who they are when they come from their higher self. This is who they are when they are in their best place, their best self. But all of us have wounds, all of us have defenses, all of us have fears. And so when we go into those wounds or we go into those fears, we lose touch with our higher self. Now, some of us may do this for a few minutes, some of this may do it for a few years, but we go into that wounded state of anger or fear or resentment, whatever it may be. And so I'm going to show you the strengths of each of these personalities, but also the vulnerabilities when we are wounded, and then how that creates and impacts our health physically. For these folks here, when they are in fear, when they are in defense, they have other belief systems that show up. Their belief is that the world is a very dangerous place. They have an existential fear so that everything can be going well in their life, but they're frightened because of what's coming. There's always a fear that something could go wrong. It doesn't matter how much is going right, how much they have in place to protect themselves if something does happen. There's still this fear that the world is a dangerous place. And the truth is, there are dangers in this world, but there's also exquisite goodness in this world. There are amazingly helpful, wonderful people that have hearts of gold and would give you the shirt off their back. And yes, there are other people who are dangerous, but again, we see what we expect to see. When you expect to see miracles happening every day, it's amazing how you see them. When you expect to see danger every day, it's what you see. There is also a belief system when they are in fear that they are safe if they are invisible. So they tend to not have anything to say. They try to hide in a crowd. They get behind others who are more vocal so that they don't have to be seen. They can become invisible and safe. Now, there are times we do that and we feel very powerful. We feel very safe, but we just don't want to interact at the moment. We want to be more quiet, more reflective, and more observing. That's not a defense, that's a strength. I'm talking about when you're in defense, when you are in fear and you do this, which is very different from choosing it from a place of health and healing. There is an intrinsic belief system that I don't belong here. They, no matter where they are, they feel that they don't belong, whether they're with their family, they're at work, or they're alone even. They don't feel like they belong in this world. And oftentimes they feel trapped. And there's the ability, I think you may have seen this picture where they have a mouse in a cage where there's a cage door in front of them, but the box that they're in has a 3-inch wall and they could jump over it at any point in time. But all they're looking at is the cage door in front of them. They don't see around them that they are not trapped at all. They can get out in a minute. And many of us have that feeling that I feel trapped, even though there is nobody and nothing trapping them. Because of this existential fear, there's acute anxiety in the body. And we know now that through all the research that's been done, that the primary cause of disease is stress, which gives you the power of meditation, shows you the power of yoga or qigong, whatever your way of bringing peace into your body is. It has a massive impact to bring you physical health, not just emotional and spiritual health. And so when we know that stress is the precursor, we can take a look at some folks who would say to me, but I have a pre-existing condition. Both of my parents are diabetic. We know that when we look and both of your parents are diabetic, let's say 2 diabetic parents have 5 children. We know statistically 2 to 3 of those children will have diabetes and 2 or 3 others won't. And what is the variable is really amazing. If you look at the children who develop diabetes and both their parents have it, because it was pure genetics, everybody should get it. All the kids should have it. But if only some of them get it, what is the variable that causes some children to get the diabetes and others not? If you look at the lifestyle of the children who develop the diabetes, they are still eating the same way their parents did. They have the same belief systems their parents did. They may even decorate the parents the way their parents did. They have the same political belief systems as their parents. Look at the children who don't develop diabetes, and they've created a very different lifestyle. They approach differently, the world differently. They have a different viewpoint, and they don't develop any of those patterns. All of my brothers and sisters are on 2 different medications for cholesterol. 3 of my brothers have had heart attacks. My sister has had a heart attack. I am on no medications. It's not because I refuse to take it. My doctors continuously, my yearly exams will say, I don't understand this at your age. You should be on all these medications. And yet there are no medications. And certainly I am no better than any of my brothers and sisters. We're all the same. We came from the same place. And yet, what is your spiritual belief systems? What is your ability to take time away to let go of stress? For this particular personality style, what happens here, and if you don't know if this is your style, take a look at your medical history. I had my students in the very first weekend in class, because we met all day Friday, Saturday, Sunday, every 2 months. For the first class, they had to take an hour and write down every single disorder they have had that they can remember as far back as infancy. Throughout their entire life, what are the disorders, what are the diseases, what are the so-called accidents that they have had, broken bones, sprains, throughout their life, and write it down. Just taking that medical history allows them to begin to understand their personality style and see how that impacts them. This particular style, these are the folks that are always losing their glasses. They can't find their car keys. They can't find wherever they put things, because nobody's home. You know how you talk to some people and nobody's home, you don't see anything, you don't, it's like you can tell that they don't even see you. They're looking beyond you. They don't see you. And it's like nobody's there. And you have to repeat things 3 times or hold their arm to bring them back to reality so that they can hear you and you can have a great conversation with them. This is that personality when they are in fear. So they have a lot of difficulties with bones. They will take a shower at night and discover this huge black and blue mark on their leg and say, I have no idea where that came from because nobody was home. They walked into a table, and now that they see the black and blue mark on their leg, it hurts. It's been hurting all day, but they haven't paid any attention to their body. They weren't fully present, so they didn't even feel the pain until they stopped at night. And then all of a sudden, they acknowledge the black and blue, they acknowledge the pain. Or we go through our day so busy, and then at night, we notice our joints hurt. This hurts, that hurts. The pain's been there all day, but we've been preoccupied with other things. We haven't noticed our body. So they have a history of issues with their knees, their joints, their neck disorders, because what ends up happening, oftentimes they want to keep this 5 feet or 6 feet of energy in their head. And so literally their neck compresses energetically. So they keep all the energy in their head. So they're not present of what's going on in their bodies. It's an amazing way. I, many, many years ago, was a Catholic nun, and we used to have long black habits that we wore. And before I entered, the nuns would wear hair shirts because they were so irritating. They wanted them to pay no attention to their physical body. They wanted them only to think of spirit and not be present. So they caused the body to become so uncomfortable, they would disassociate with their physical bodies. It was theoretically, in their mind's eye, a spiritual way of disassociating from physical form. We embody for a reason. We're here, whatever your faith system, we're embodied essence or embodied souls. We're here to be aware of what's going on with ourselves physically. But these folks here tend to have a lot of neck pain because they keep their energies in their head trying to disassociate. They can develop skin disorders, muscle disorders, sciatica. They can become very hypochondriacal. They're because of that existential fear, they're frightened of every disorder, every disease. Every time they have a headache, it could be brain cancer. They lose their breath. Maybe I have lung cancer. There's always a crisis there. There's a major issue that needs to be checked on. Emotionally, they can develop panic disorders and ADHD. So take a look at your own medical history, and is this something that's common? Some folks, you talk to them and they have a series of broken bones in their history. The second style is the empathic. This develops at the time of bottle feeding or breastfeeding. And what ends up happening, I lived overseas for 10 years in the Caribbean. And when I came back to America, I started noticing so much more. And I saw mothers who had babies in a carriage, and there was a bottle resting on a blanket to feed the baby. So the baby's physical need was being met, but emotionally and spiritually, the baby wasn't being held. So the emotional and spiritual needs were not being met, even though physically, the physical needs were being met. And so what ends up happening is that this wound begins, and it's not conscious, obviously, this is pre-verbal, but the wound begins at this point in life, which is why this becomes a huge part of their personality. In their healthy state as adults, they are very interested in helping other people. They enter professions of service, whatever that may be. And when they do it to an extreme, that becomes codependency. That becomes enmeshment. They start to disappear, and they're so about servicing others that they disappear in their own lives. They know everybody else's needs, but they don't recognize their own. But in a healthy state, they recognize others' needs and they take care of it. These are the wonderful people that in the neighborhood, they get folks together to make dinners to take to somebody who's just had surgery. They organize communities to come together and support other people who are wounded. It comes naturally to them. They don't even think about it. They want to be of service, and they call others and create a healthy community to be of service. Because they are so giving, they are very easy to trust. They're very non-threatening, and they relate very easily to other people because they are just natural givers. They are there to support and recognize everybody's needs. In an office setting, they're the ones that bring in birthday cakes when it's somebody's birthday or bring in cupcakes. They are very thoughtful and aware of other people's needs. When they are in defense, when they are feeling wounded, there's a belief system I can't get enough. There's a belief system that my needs will never be met. And I may have told Roger or Jeff this story previously, but I had a client who came in to see me whose husband saved for a long time. His wife had been asking for years for a blue BMW. They weren't in the BMW world. That was not their economic setup. But she wanted this, and he saved for years. So after 10 years of marriage, for her birthday, she got her that blue BMW that she had always wanted. And when he gave it to her, she was enraged because it was the wrong shade of blue. And she immediately went into, I never get what I want. I never get my needs met. And because that was her belief system, even when she got what she had been asking for 10 years, it wasn't right. Her ability to receive wasn't there. And so she could not accept all the sacrifice he made over this 10 years to have the ability to give his wife this one thing she had always asked for. So notice that if you have great ability to receive, if it's never enough for you, there's always something wrong with what you get. This dates back to this point in your lifetime, back in the breastfeeding and bottle feeding state. And sometimes to overcompensate for that, there's a real radical sense of entitlement. The world owes me. The world doesn't owe us anything, but there's a belief system that the world owes me. And so there is a sense of entitlement. And so taking becomes natural because I deserve it. If there's two pieces of cake, they take the biggest because they deserve it, rather than leave that or share it with somebody. And there is this illusionary belief that I can't do anything for myself. These folks are folks who become very disempowered. They really begin to believe that everybody else needs to take care of them because they're not capable of taking care of themselves. My life experience is that when we really need something, we find an amazing way to make it happen. When we truly want something, we find an amazing way to get it. That it happens for us if we truly believe we deserve it. And that means I know I can get my needs met. I may have to initiate it, but if I don't tell somebody my needs, how are they going to know what they are? And if they don't know what they are, how are they going to meet them? So it really puts the responsibility on me to do that. But you don't even ask if you believe you will never get. And so their belief system that their needs will never be met gets actualized. Their needs never get met because they've never told anybody what they were. And what happens for these folks when it comes to physical disease is addiction. Whether that addiction could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be sex, it could be work addiction. It could be computers, Facebook, it could be anything under the sun. Now, it's wonderful to enjoy all of these things in moderation, but when you start moving into the level of self-betrayal, where you know you need to get a project done by 8 o'clock in the morning for meeting, and you don't get to it because you've been very busy dealing with whatever your addiction is, then it becomes a problem. Then that time on Facebook or watching movies or having 8 drinks instead of one drink of alcohol, it really gets interference. Then the addiction is it. There is low immune function. Again, all of us go into these places of wound. All of us go into days of feeling sorry for ourselves. All of us go into those moments when we know the whole world is against us and we'll never have what we want. The difference is we can have moments doing that, or we can live our life in those belief systems. And when you spend your life in those belief systems, it has a physical effect. When you just visit them and you step out energetically, you're still balanced. It was just like a wave you went over, a little bump in the road, and it doesn't impact you physiologically. But when you live in those belief systems that are your lower self, that impacts your physical body. And with this, its low immune function takes place because our immune system is fed by activity. Our immune system is fed by movement, which is whatever your movement is, whether it's walking, whether it's karate, it's yoga, whatever it may be, movement feeds your body. Energy moves. And as energy moves through your body, it's a cleansing agent. And the energy as moves through your body keeps keeps cleaning your blood. It keeps cleaning the immune system. It keeps cleaning your digestive system. Energy keeps it moving, which is why when there is lots of energy, there tends to be very little issue with obesity because there's lots of movement. But without the movement, your immune system function starts to slow down. Diabetes takes place because for these folks, there is never enough sweetness in life. All right. And so obesity becomes an issue. This is also where anorexia and bulimia exist. So if there's an issue for anorexia or bulimia, this is a personality style that's up and about. One of the things I've noticed is that we go through periods in our life where we may really be in a super needy place. I'm not talking about having needs, but a really needy place. And when you're in that needy place, it can be for any number of reasons. Unfortunately, I have a client recently whose cousin, housemate, and brother all died within 4 months' time, all unrelated, but they all passed from cancer or different disorders. She was absolutely needy, but that's not where she lives. It's where she was for this period of time because it felt as if the rug was being pulled out underneath her all the time with all this huge amount of loss in such a short period of time. And that's something we can deal with. Before she becomes physically ill, we can deal with that. But if that's where she spends the rest of her life, then these conditions will begin to take place. So it's really looking at welcome to humanity. We all have these issues, but do we live in them? The third personality construct is the nurturer. This develops at the time of bottle feeding or breastfeeding. This develops at the time of learning to go to the bathroom on your own, learning to feed yourself, learning to become independent, right? That what ends up happening is that when a child is humiliated because they've peed their pants when they're in the process of being diaper trained, when they're having food in their high chair and they're dropping it all over the floor, and the parents are yelling and screaming at them for being a slob, or the parents ridicule them because they peed their pants when they're learning, there becomes a wound that they are never going to be good enough, that they are not smart enough, that they can't do this. And so what ends up happening is that they become the unhealthy element of this, which is the masochist. When they are in their healthy self, they are very much the nurturer. They nurture other people. So this personality construct, when it's healthy, they nurture people. They are very reliable. They will work with you. They will support you. They will have your back under all conditions. And they're very hard workers. I used to take my students on a 1-week retreat they had to do between the second and third year on Iguala in the British West Indies. And I put 4 people in every unit, 2-bedroom units, and I'd have 2 people to a room, 4 people in the unit. And somebody would always say, I hope we have a great masochist in this suite, because the masochist is going to clean up everybody. The masochist is going to do all the dishes. The masochist is going to make sure everybody takes care of everything, and they'll get the laundry done. They'll do the dishes. They'll help us do it. They'll do the extra work. It's going to be great. I hope we have a good one here to take care of us. And I, of course, would have a few opinions on that and let them know darn well, no masochist is supposed to be taking care of them. They are all capable of taking care of themselves. So take a deep breath and take responsibility. And they'd all say, don't tell Dorothy we're here. Don't tell Dorothy what happened. And I'd always found out. It's like a mother, you always find out what your class is doing, right? But these folks, they are very reliable. They are very hard workers and loyal. They will have your back. You can count on them. And they are persevering. If you have a project that's due tomorrow, they'll stay up to 3 o'clock in the morning to make sure you get it done, to make sure it works for you. These are the folks you want to have at your back. And they are capable of massive amounts of love. They love unconditionally. And I really, they would say, when you love hard. They love fully with their whole heart and soul. They will be there for you, and you can trust them. They are loyal, and they will never turn against you. They will never speak about you. They can keep confidentiality. They can be completely trusted. When they are wounded, they do life very differently. When they are wounded, they have a belief system that they can never be loved because of who they are. They are only loved because of what they do for you. And so they will wait on you hand and foot because that's what they believe makes them lovable, because they don't believe they could be loved simply because they exist. You know, um, when my kids were very little, they did what many kids do. The teacher gave them papers to give to their parents, and they stayed in the school bag. They never got delivered till the day it was due. And my kids said to me one morning, "Mom, each of them, I have two children. We need $500, Mom, for summer camp." I said, baby, I don't walk around with $1,000 in cash in the house. That's not what we do here. And they said, but Mom, we need it. And my mother happened to be visiting. And I said, Mom, could I borrow $1,000? I'll give it back to you, in a week. Let me get to the bank. Let me do what I need to do. I'm very busy right now. And she said, sure, you can have the money. Dan and I will cancel our vacation. I said, Mom, when are you going on vacation? She said, in November. I said, Mom, it's May. The kids are preparing for the end of school year. Are you going to have it within a week? She said, that's all right. Dan and I will cancel our vacation. You can have the money now. By the time I dropped the kids off at school and came home, my mother had called every one of my brothers and sisters to let them know that she and Dan were going to cancel the vacation they planned for 2 years because I needed money. Now, in my mom's eye, this was making her the best mother in the whole wide world. And my sister called me, this is pre-cell phones. My sister called me and said, what the hell did you do? Do you know what Mama did? Mama called every one of us and let us know that you were taking away her vacation. We can't wait to talk to you to find out the real story, because we all knew Mom needed to make this very dramatic. She needed to suffer immensely so that everybody would know what a wonderful mom she was. And God bless her. This was how many people do their lives. It's how my mom did it. There was no need to suffer. Being generous and great, and she would have the money back in less than a week because I was so packed. I'd have time to go to the bank and get it for her, get the cash for her. There's a belief system: I must never be angry or make others uncomfortable. The fact is, we all get angry, and it has nothing to do with anybody else. We may wake up today and it's raining and we're angry because we wanted to go walking. Welcome to humanity. We all get angry. And when you can recognize I'm angry, sometimes you can laugh at yourself because you realize you're crazy over nothing. You're really getting crazy and really angry about nothing at all. And you can laugh at your own craziness. Welcome to humanity. And we do make other people uncomfortable. It's one thing to do it intentionally, that's cruel. But we can make people uncomfortable just by being us. Just by showing up in a room, we can make people uncomfortable. And when you're frightened of doing that, you're frightened of moving, you're frightened of speaking. I may say too much, I may say the wrong thing. And you never get to be who you really are because you're frightened of making somebody else uncomfortable. And then you live in a world of self-betrayal. There's also a belief that I wish I could, but I can't. My feeling is, if there is anything you wish you could, your soul does not create a dream you're incapable of achieving. Sometimes we're not willing to pay the price to have that dream, but there isn't a dream we can't have. If we can visualize it, we make it happen. The feeling is, am I willing to pay the price? Because if it's to take a vacation, it may mean that I don't buy anything, I don't eat out, I don't do anything in order to take that vacation, and I'm not willing to live that sacrifice in order to achieve this dream. That's okay, but you don't wish it badly enough to make it happen. So take it back and look. And there's also the illusion of I am powerless. I am a victim and I am powerless. No, not one person on this planet has an ounce of power than anybody else. The fact is, some people are terrified and they don't know the difference between control and power. Powerful people never control. The only people that control are people in fear. And so when we see people that try to control us, and that's not us, we can feel they have much more power than we do, when in fact they don't. They are just very controlling, and that's not how we use our energy. For these particular people, when they live in that place of powerlessness, of victim and so forth, and suffering, the physical disorders they develop, they start with digestive and eating disorders. And I don't mean eating disorders in the terms of anorexia and bulimia. I mean eating disorders, diverticulitis. Crohn's disease, all of these other diseases that take place, because oftentimes they're eating, oh, I'm sorry, they are eating when they are in a place of, let me see if I can go back there. Yes, they are eating while they're standing up. They don't even sit down to eat. They're serving everybody and they're eating while they're standing up. Ulcers is what comes about when they believe they are not good enough, and they're filled with fear that they're not doing enough, they're not serving enough, and that anxiety creates gastric disorders and ulcers develop in the system. Liver problems come about. Liver is where we hold a lot of our emotions. And the emotions of powerlessness and victimization end up in passive aggressiveness. It ends up in resentment. It ends up in bitterness. And all of those emotions of bitterness and resentment end up impacting the liver, which really is the cleanser for the body. And so all of these other facts take place. Breast cancer is one of these issues. I worked with a woman in the hospital. She had a double mastectomy. She had 4 children under 5 years of age, and she was in for a double mastectomy. And I said, I hear they got all of the cancer. You're going to be able to go home in 2 weeks. She said, I'm never going home. And I said, why would you never go home? She said, I never wanted children. My husband wanted those kids, and I had them for him. Then he got a job as a traveling salesman, and he's never home. I'm like a single mother raising those kids. I never wanted them. I don't want to go home again. I want to die in the hospital. I said, there's no reason for you to die. The cancer's gone. You're healthy now. We're just getting your strength back up before you leave. She said, I will not leave this hospital. And that woman died before she left the hospital. She did not have cancer. There were not complications from the surgery. She just died one night in her sleep. We have immense power. One of the things that I am most annoyed at with physicians is when they give you a prognosis that you have 3 months to live. If most people are told they have 3 months to live, they will be dead in 3 months. Other personalities will say there's not a chance. My mother is a contradiction. My mom, when she was in her early 50s, developed colorectal cancer, and she had so much of it, the doctors removed what they could. They said, if you're alive in 3 months, we'll go back and get more. Well, we'll go back and get the rest, but we don't believe you're going to be here. She worked for an airlines, and the airlines gave her a lifetime pass, thinking she could make 1, maybe 2 trips before she passed. Well, my mom said, I'm going nowhere. I have 5 children and they need me. I was in religious life. I had a brother who was in Zambia, Africa, teaching at an American college in Africa. I had a brother who was gay coming out of the closet, and I had a sister who was hooked on heroin and coke. My mother said, I'm going nowhere. I need to be here for my children. My mother lived another 35 years, and she had a lifetime pass. She traveled all over the world for the next 35 years free of charge because she received this pass. She was determined. I'm not listening to the doctors. I am going to stay. I'm going to do what I choose to do. Look at the number of people you know who ignore a prognosis and go on forever, and the number who agree with the prognosis and pass according to the doctor's ideas. Chronic fatigue is also another one of these that goes with this personality of always wanting to be of service because they're supposed to be. I had a client who came in with chronic disease, a young woman, this beautiful guy brought her in, and I said, who's that handsome man that brought you in? She goes, that's my ex-fiance. And I said, why an ex-fiance if he's bringing you in to see me? She was on a walker. And she said, well, he wants children. My doctor told me I have chronic fatigue, and if I have children, it could kill me, which is not true, but this is what her doctor told her. He was, I guess, unaware of chronic fatigue. And I worked with her doing healing work and saw at one point I had a vision of her working in, it looked like a huge playground where she was teaching sports to children. And I said, tell me what you do for a profession. She said, I am a teacher. My parents are first generation from Italy. And they said if girls go to college, they have to become teachers. So I became a teacher, but I didn't want to be. And so her first semester in, she hated it. By Christmas, she had developed a disease. They couldn't figure it out, so she quit teaching. And by March, she was diagnosed with chronic fatigue. And so she had spent a year and a half basically in bed with chronic fatigue. And her parents didn't want her to go anywhere or do anything outside of the house except go to the doctors. She worked with me and I said, do you have a child, a boy or girl center near you, the Boys and Girls Club? She said, yes. I said, why don't you see if you can volunteer there? 2 days a week, take your walker, volunteer if you can help the kids. She went there and worked there for a number of months, loved it. She did it so well, they asked her if she could come on part-time, and she started feeling better and better, worked there part-time, ended up getting full-time, no longer needed the walker, no longer needed a cane, got her health back. She was chronically fatigued in a career she hated. When she left that career, found a career she loved, the chronic fatigue disappeared. I stayed with her when she married this boy. I stayed with her through the second pregnancy. Perfectly healthy pregnancies, perfectly healthy babies. Her mindset left. She left a job that made her chronically fatigued. She did not like it, left it, and created a whole new life for herself. Persistent fatigue is another. People who give and give and give, and they don't fill their own needs. They don't stop and go to bed when they need to be in bed. They don't eat when they're hungry because they just keep giving and giving. Their body wears out and disease takes place. Truly, when you look at all of this, what is going on in your life, and then take a look at what your diseases are. The fourth one, is only 5. The fourth one is a healthy leader. These are the folks that when they are 3 years of age, they have other issues that show up. I'll talk about that in a minute. But these are the folks that they are phenomenal leaders. They are phenomenal managers. And a leader is not a manager. It's two very different strains. Leaders walk in front of the crowd. They have a vision. People follow their vision because of their charisma. They follow them. Managers get to structure things and keep things in order. Managers manage teams. Leaders lead. It's a very different thing. Leaders may be very bad managers because they're not meant to manage, they're meant to lead. It's a very different skill set. But these folks are great leaders. They are great managers. They're powerful speakers, very charismatic. Great sense of humor, powerful speakers. They can hold a stage. You can speak to 2,000, 3,000 people, and people, as they are listening, they are extremely generous in their personality, very entertaining, very charming. So they're really wanted at gatherings, they're wanted at parties because they become the life of the party. They bring the energy, they bring the charisma, they bring all of that to the party and make it very much alive. They are very cool under fire. Years ago, I was in religious life, and when I left religious life as a Catholic nun, and I moved to Manhattan, became an international airline stewardess. And in one of our flights, we were 35,000 feet in the air coming back from Paris. I flew internationally, coming back from Paris, and the front door started shaking. And I had a purser next to me, and men made twice as much money as women did. Somehow, just because they had a penis, they were much more qualified for this job, and so they made twice as much money as we did. And we were sitting there, the door was shaking, and I said to the purser, I think you should notify the captain. He said, are you out of your mind? I'm not going to be the first one out of this door. And he ran to the back of the plane and took a seat at the back of the plane and left me there at the front, by the front door to handle it. I called the captain, told him what's happening. He came out, the first officer came out. We worked with it, descended the plane. They fixed the door. We then went back up to 35,000 feet. Definitely not cool under fire. This man was not a leader. Clearly, he took off when there was a problem. He was not a born leader. This person that I was working with, I stayed. This is part of my personality. I stayed. We dealt with it and got the problem resolved and then went on. So you look and see, what is your personality? How do you deal when there's a crisis? Do you run in a panic or do you stay and deal? Nobody wants a crisis, but how do you deal when they show up? This defines so much of who you are. When these people are in fear, they become very intimidating or very seductive or very manipulative. When we go, this develops about 3 years of age. And an example, a very quick one, mom and dad are going out to a movie on a Friday night. And this little boy or girl, that could be either sex, all of these could be either sex. Let's just say a boy, mom and dad are going out, and that boy takes a temper tantrum. I don't want you to go. I don't want you to go. Mom says, okay, never mind. We'll stay home. This little boy gets mom and dad to stay home. Dad becomes resentful of this boy because he's controlling mom. Mom is not really the mother anymore. She becomes an ally with the boy, and dad now becomes jealous of the little boy. So all of a sudden, this little boy starts to see how much power he has in the family. He can control his mom and dad's movement. He can make them stay at home. And what ends up happening is that he now, at 3 years of age, becomes terrified, realizing he's got the power to control this house. So, what if he needs something? He's the most powerful person in the house. He now has this fear that he has to be in control of everything. So, as he gets older, whenever he gets nervous, he becomes very controlling. If this little boy, instead, mom and dad going out, and instead says, Mommy, you're so beautiful. I love it when you stay home. Mommy, please stay here. I love it when you read me stories. I don't want a babysitter. Now, what happens is he seduced mom and dad to stay home. Now he has seduction. This is the boy who becomes the player when he's an adult. And we have women who are players as well. But this is the boy who becomes a player. He becomes very manipulative, very seductive, because he knows that's what gets him what he wants. And when he's in defense, that's where he goes. He's either intimidating or seductive or manipulative. Whatever worked as a child, unless he outgrew this, this is what he does as an adult. And frequently he wants all the power in the relationship, but none of the responsibility. I would be the head of the household. You're responsible for every darn thing that goes on in this home. You're responsible for the kids. You're responsible for the house. You're responsible for everything that takes place, where we go, where we don't go, what happens. I want no responsibility at all. I just want to be in charge. And there is a belief system that says, don't get too close to me unless you look up to me. They are terrified. This is where imposter syndrome comes. They are terrified that if you really saw them, you wouldn't respect them or value them. And they don't want you to see them because they want to be loved and they want to be respected. They convince themselves they don't need anybody because they don't believe anybody could be there for them because they felt so absolutely alone when they were 3 years of age. What ends up happening for them medically is they start developing benign essential tremors. That's when you see some folks, they don't have MS or anything, but their hand may shake. Some people, the hand just shakes when they're really highly stressed. For some, it shakes all the time, and it's a benign essential tremor. That's because they have so much stress within them, they don't know how to let it out. And so physically, the stress comes out through movement, through uncontrolled movement in their hands or their arms. They develop gallbladder disorders because gallbladder is about rage. They have gall. There's a lot of rage in their body. It creates gallbladder disorders. I had a couple I worked with. One woman said to me, we've been married 23 years and I never once been mad at my husband. And I said, I need to hear about this because I think that's a complete impossibility. She said, no, I've never once been mad at my husband. And what ended up happening, within 2 weeks, she was in the hospital having her gallbladder removed. It was highly inflamed and infected, and the gallbladder needed to be removed. All of that was held in. Her thought was if she became enraged at her husband, she wouldn't be a good wife. And as I said earlier, with the nurturer and the masochist, I am loved because of what I do, not because of who I am. So she only did good things because it was important that her husband love her. So she never really showed up. And all of that rage she held inside. Fibromyalgia, that was my specialty. NIH gave me grant funding to research my work with fibro for my part of my doctoral dissertation, which is on the psychological and spiritual causes of physical disease and disorders. And fibromyalgia is folks who develop that. They're over 97% of it are females, but men get this as well. But what happens is when you look at point of onset of fibromyalgia, oftentimes it's when the child is going away to first grade and she's not going to be home, or going away to college across country, or getting married and moving across country. And the mother is terrified that she can't be there to protect her child. Because in this belief system, and this is along the bladder meridian, which starts in the forehead and goes down either side of the spine. It goes out to the edge of the hips and then down the back of your legs like nylon seams. And now the doctors have 18 points they press. If 16 are acute and pain, you're diagnosed with fibromyalgia. But it's a bladder meridian, which is fear around an inability to protect others. And so the mother has an inability to protect a child that moves far away. What if she's lonely? What if she doesn't have any friends? What if she doesn't fit in? What if she fails and there's nobody there to comfort her? And the mother's anxiety is held in certain patterns because she wants to overprotect her child rather than saying her child has to develop social skills to make friends and amongst strangers when she's going to college far away. The child needs to learn how to study, and if she fails a test, how to study more. The child learns by failure. And the mother needs to step back and allow her child to grow, to fail, and to have sad days, to have bad days, and to have great days, because a child's self-esteem develops every time they learn to do something more. A child's self-esteem develops every time they have a bit of success, and they never get to have the failures and the successes of mom is always protecting them. This personality style also develops heart attacks. If you think of I'm going to huff and puff, the three little pigs, I'm going to huff and puff and blow your house down. All the energy is held in the chest and the upper body. And that's this personality. They're going to huff and puff. They are controllers, huff and puff and blow the house down. So heart attacks, heart disease, all of that takes place. Or strokes, because all the energy is held in the top part of the body. For men, prostate disorders. I've had men show up shortly after retirement. I had two men walk into my office after being laid off after 20 years with the company. One man was delighted. He hasn't liked the job for 8 years, but stayed there to support his family and put his children through college. But he felt relieved that he was being laid off. He could now get a job he would like, doing something very different. Another man came in and filled with bitterness and rage that he gave his life to this company and they let him go. And he became more and more enraged, started drinking more and more, anger, acting out. And then his wife had to go to work. He felt completely emasculated because in his belief system, a man holds a good job. They lost it. They emasculated him. When his wife had to go to work, he felt emasculated even further. And so what ended up happening is that in that emasculation, he developed prostate cancer. That the rage and the anger took place because his manhood had been so challenged. All right. The last is the achiever. And again, we all want to achieve. There's a healthy level of achieving. There's a healthy level of success. But when it becomes obsessive, this is where we move into the pathology. This is where the diseases develop. But this person is a highly successful individual, high energy levels. They work, they get things done, they like order, they like structure. They just make things happen. People like being around them because they are so productive, they make things happen and they're fun to be with. Right? They don't do drama. They just make things happen. There is no drama in their lives. They're very well liked because they're go-getters who make things happen. They're full of vibrancy. They're full of hope. They're full of optimism, and they make things work. And they are very organized. So they're nice to be around. There's no chaos. There's no drama. This is when they are really in their higher self. When they step into their lower self, they can become very rigid. It's black or white. It's right or wrong. It's good or bad. There's no such thing as gray. And when they move into that level of rigidity, there's actually no talking to them either, because there's one right way to do everything, and that's what they know, and there's no discussion. So what ends up happening is they have a belief system that the only way they achieve worthiness to exist is by being perfect. They have a belief system that is more important to be perfect than it is to be real. So they lose who they are in their desire to be perfect. They never get to be natural. They never get to be human. They never get to fail, because failure makes them absolutely unworthy of existence. And so they have to be busy at all times. So they are not going to sit down and have a glass of wine with you and put their feet up, or have a cup of tea with you and put their feet up and just relax. If they sit down, they're going to sit down and work. And there always has to be something to do. The fact is, there will always be something to do till the day we go home. There is always going to be something that we could accomplish. Having the ability to stop and not accomplish, to really move into the process of simply being, because there's a huge difference between being in your life and doing in your life. The gift of being is a gift you give yourself. For these folks, good enough is not good enough. Good enough is a failure. They need to be the best. They need to excel at everything. And we all want to be good at what we do. We all want to be great at what we do. But the difference is we can end up being okay. We got an 85. Well, at least I passed. I wished I got 100, but at least I passed. Versus I didn't get 100, and this is a crisis. I failed miserably. I should have gotten 100. These are the kids who come home and they get a B plus, and the parents say, "What went wrong?" Rather than congratulations. I'm proud of you. What can we do? If you want to do better, what can I do to help you? But all of us have strengths. I was all A's in most subjects, but chemistry, I had to cheat in order to get a C. I cheated on my lab partner because chemistry was not my strength. Could not do it, couldn't understand it. To this day, I cannot stand it. I had to take statistics to get a master's. I had to take statistics to get a doctorate. And boy, oh boy, I prayed close to tears just to get a C, just to pass, just to get through that course. We all have different strengths. Our minds work differently. And owning that I can be phenomenal at this, but okay at this, which is why in my doctoral dissertation, thank God I was teaching at the University of Connecticut Medical School, and the statisticians at the medical school did all of my dissertation research. I gave them all the examples, all the results. They dealt with it because it was overwhelming. There's no way I could have done that. Know your strengths. We all have them, but know your limitations. We've all got those as well. All right. What happens with these folks when they are in that uncomfortable place, when they are in that lower self place of self condemnation, they develop disorders of the heart. What ends up happening for them oftentimes is the heart disorders are very different from the heart attacks. The heart attacks are what the defiant, the leaders have because of the high stress, they have heart attacks. The rigid will have heart disease. It's very different. They're supposed to be perfect, and what they do is they close down their heart in relationship in an attempt to be perfect. They are so busy struggling to be perfect that they don't allow themselves to be in relationship, and they develop heart disease. Because they are perfect, they sit so rigidly, you don't even see their lungs pulsate. You don't see them breathing. They take up so little space, they don't want to be too much. And they hold their body so tight, they hold it so rigidly that literally even constipation is a problem because their digestive system doesn't function. They hold themselves so tight, their digestive system can't function. And because they don't lean back and really take deep breaths, they have pulmonary disorders. The pulmonary disorders are really about grief. A lot of grief or depression exists in the lungs, the inability to take in life and all of its changes. They don't want life and all of its changes. They want to get it perfect, and they want to keep it perfect. They don't ever want anything to change because they figured it out. They want it to stay exactly the same way. Nothing in life stays the same. Roses are exquisite. Roses die. They'll be back next year, but there's always change and transition in life. And circulation is minimal because, again, they hold themselves so tightly that circulation becomes an issue for them, especially in their legs. All right. And here we go. We've gone through all 5 of them. And recognizing that all of us have all 5 of these, but in different proportions. And that's how our uniqueness shows up. What percentage you are of the creative, what percentage of the oral, and so forth, defines your personality. And there's no right or wrong personality. They're all exquisite. And so when you are happy with who you are and you realize you are the gift you bring to the world, the rest of it is detail. When we have the option of falling in love with who we are, and that is a very healthy statement. When we have the option of falling in love with who we are, we become really happy for the person we become. I'm not who I'm going to be in 5 years or in 10 years, but I'm the best me I can be today. When I'm the best me I can be today, I can't really ask anything more. That's it. I've done my best. I've shown up. And with that, the rest truly is absolute detail. And then you really get the opportunity to enjoy your life, to take off and do what needs to be done. This is who I am. If you have any questions, and I certainly have time now for those who have the audacity to reach out and ask a question, I'd love to answer it for you. But this is my email address. Feel free. This is my website, askdrdorothy.com, and my LinkedIn profile. As I said when I started, I wrote a book on this that takes this to far more detail. It's called Your Soul Sings, Your Body Dances. It's available on Amazon. And that for those of you who really are interested in this and want to pursue it further, it's there. I'll stop sharing my screen and make this much smaller. I hope you were able to understand and get something from this and to to learn a little bit about who you are and look at how our life is really in our hands. When we take a look at welcome to humanity, and this is what I say to my clients all the time, welcome to humanity. We are never going to be perfect. We aren't perfect. Give up that trip. It's an exhausting race, and you're never going to get there. Enjoy the process of unfolding, enjoy the process of becoming, because we're always in the process of becoming. That's who we are as human beings, you know?
Dr. Dorothy,
Yeah.
I'm Leslie Shurikow. Quick
Hi,
question.
Leslie. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. And I ask questions, Roger. Ask my husband. He actually gets mad at me because I ask too many questions. I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand on this.
Well, I'm glad you have the audacity to speak up. You go,
Yeah.
girl.
Um, so will you be sharing your slides with us? Other than, I know this is being recorded,
Right.
but will you be sharing your slides?
If you want them, Leslie, put your address, put your email address in the chat.
Okay.
All right. And I'm more than willing to share it with you. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So
Dr.
anything, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
I'm
go
done.
ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to thank, yeah, Dr. Dorothy, thank you so much. And for anyone interested in the chat, I've shared at the very top her link to the book she was referring to, her website, and her LinkedIn if you would like to connect with her. And before everyone hops off or asks any questions, I would love to grab a photo. So if you guys want to come back on camera,
All of you
grab
folks were hiding. Come on back. Just so he loves his pictures.
give it a couple more seconds. And I'm gonna shift you guys around. I'm moving all the people with their cameras off to the bottom. All right, cool.
Great.
Chris, last chance. You want to get on camera?
I don't know how to even put myself on camera. On the bottom, there's like a little video.
Roger, run over there and help her.
Oh, that says start video? Yeah.
Oh. Hey, there she is. Cool. All right, everybody ready?
Okay.
Yep.
All right, 1, 2, 3.
Cheese.
Jeez. Cool, thank you. Now, please feel free to ask any questions.
Any questions at all? And if you don't agree with me, I will survive that trauma. It's really not, So, yeah. Are there any questions? Leslie, you seem to have another one that you, Jeff had something you wanted to say. You want to tell me what that was, or if you remember?
Oh, now I can't remember. But
Oh,
I remember all.
so close and yet so far. Does anybody else have any questions I can answer for you?
I do, Dorothy.
Go ahead.
So how far do you think that NIH is able to go at this time with the work that you've done and the research? And I mean, are there
There are tens of thousands of research projects dealing with energy medicine and dealing with the impact. The way they phrase it to make it more palatable for the general public is they'll tell you that stress is the major precipitator of disease. All right. Where does stress come from? It comes from our belief systems. It comes from our emotional frame of mind. But they won't go into psychospiritual because that sounds too much. But they will tell you that stress is a major precursor to disease, and therefore they want you to practice mindfulness. They want you to develop emotional intelligence. They want you to do meditations. They encourage yoga. They encourage walking. They encourage various forms of soft, gentle exercise because all of that allows energy to flow through the system. They won't speak of it that way. And what ends up happening is that in much of the research we did, the findings were not allowed to be published in AMA journals. The American Medical Association does not want it published because that's a threat to the AMA. Because if people really spent all of their money and time in integrative healthcare, they wouldn't be spending anywhere near as much in allopathic healthcare and so-called traditional healthcare. And so there's a transition. But, the numbers of physicians who came through my program really show me that they had entered medicine to be of service. And they really were beginning to feel that they are just on an assembly line. that the insurance companies are forcing them to spend 15 minutes per patient to keep on moving and keep on moving, that they weren't able to do the level or the quality of healthcare that they wanted. So many were leaving allopathic and becoming functional medicine practitioners, or not taking insurance and opening up practices without taking insurance and doing things like that idea. But your question was about NIH. NIH is coming around, but they have to deal with insurance companies and they're dealing with the AMA. So NIH can say, we have these research projects that are done, but if AMA doesn't allow us to publish them, and I haven't done any of this research now for a few years, but they would allow anything that was inconclusive or didn't prove something to be published, but not if it was positively shown. That, such as my work with chronic fatigue or my work with fibromyalgia, or our work with transplant patients. Dr. Oz, who used to have a TV show, he and his wife had a unit down at Columbia Medical and Transplant Unit, and my students were asked to go down there and work with the transplant patients to help them learn to accept the transplants.
Can I mention one thing? We just passed, unfortunately, Prop 1 in California, and I feel a lot of it is the hospital industry. So just, which is allopathic, which is stuck.
Right. Yeah, and not for a moment do I want to make allopathic physicians wrong. I mean, there's no right or wrong here. We need it all. If my son breaks his leg, I want to take him to a doctor and have that doctor fix his leg. All right. I'm going to be doing energy work on the way to the hospital so that Mikey's leg can heal in 2 weeks rather than 8 weeks. But I also want a cast put on. I want it reset if it needs to be reset. We're partners. We're not competitors. We're partners. And if we can see that as partners in healthcare, we've got so much to offer. I think about this with everything. We're all walking this earth together. Whenever we create an other, whenever we create a they, we've created pathology.
Dr. Dorothy, thank
Yeah.
you so much for everything that I took so many notes, and I'm just when we feel ourselves moving toward wounded state,
Right.
I think sometimes we don't know we're moving toward a wounded state, and I hear you saying, okay, mindfulness and just more movement, getting whatever it takes to get energy going. Is there any other thing you can help us to know?
When you move into woundedness, there's a pattern to that. Right? Some of us move into depression. Some of us move into anxiety. Some of us move into self-pity. We all have a place that's our familiar place to go to. Know what that is and identify that. I was raised in an orphanage, as I said, and then adopted. And when I was adopted because South Boston, where I grew up, is extremely Irish Catholic. And what ended up happening is that my dad didn't believe Irish children belonged in an orphanage because somehow we're special. Everybody thinks they're special. So he brought me there, but he was really a sadist. And so we were whipped every day or beaten. And my dad and mom would fight over whether he could beat us up as toddlers with closed fists or open fists. So it was, today he would be in prison, but in those days it was not acknowledged. And when I moved into that house at 6, I knew I was blessed to not have to live there for 6 years. But when I moved in, I realized my job was to keep my mother and brothers and sisters alive until I left that house. And so at 6, I was so dramatically overwhelmed at the realization that I came into this home, I was adopted, but I now had to keep all these people alive until they were able to leave. So clearly I worked through that, did a lot of my own therapy, did all my own work. And I don't practice mindfulness, I live it. And I certainly work on always developing greater emotional intelligence. But what happens now, I never get overwhelmed. Now, let me change that. I rarely get overwhelmed now. But on the moments I get overwhelmed, because I've got 14 things I need to do by 6 o'clock and it's already 3:30. The moment I get overwhelmed, I know darn well the adult woman isn't overwhelmed. Because when I've got too much to do, I write out my list. And I start with the easiest things because when I can do, and some people say do the hard one first, I don't. I do the easiest because when I do 4 or 5 easy things, I figure I'm on a roll. And when I'm on a roll, it makes everything that much easier, right? That's my mindset. So I know that if I'm going into overwhelm, that's my 6-year-old.
Mm.
That's not me.
Mm.
I know how to deal with life without being overwhelmed. So if I'm overwhelmed, that's this beautiful little girl who was brought into this home with a responsibility no 6-year-old should have. So what I do is simply, okay, sweetheart, I got this. I got this, honey. Let's move in. The adult knows what she's doing. Let's figure out, I'm getting overwhelmed. Let me write out my list. And so, no, where do you go? Where do you go when you go into that wound itself?
Mhm.
And we can go anywhere, because I also go into I'm not enough. I also go into, oh my God, how did you do this one? You know, somebody's going to find out, right? We all go there, but we go there like rarely. We have that standard place that we go on a regular basis. So know what that is and realize this, the age in which that wound took place.
Yeah.
And when you recognize the age at which that wound took place, you can recognize that's that little girl or boy. That's not me. I have learned how to deal with this. That sweet little thing didn't know how to do it. And welcome to humanity. We are all human. God bless us and save us. We are all human. None of us are done till the day we go home. You know?
You know, I see Leslie has her hand up.
Leslie, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I remember what I was going to ask. So your book, Your Soul Sings and Your Body Dances, and that is about these 5 constructs, personality constructs.
It's about these, and I mean, there's a whole chapter on each. I gave you like 5-10 minutes on each. There's a
Right.
whole chapter on it in much more detail, and asking you questions so that you can really identify for yourself, where are you? How does that work for you? What works with that?
So like on, I just bring up the Enneagram because, you know, Roger is
Yeah.
big on that. But with your personality constructs, are you are we basically like in only one and not the other 4?
No, you have all 5. You
Oh, so
have all 5.
5.
Now, you may have, and if I may take a wild guess, I would say that you've got a good number of the leader quality in you. Okay. That there's a good percentage of leader in you. And that in addition, you have an ability when you choose to get extremely angry and you want what you want when you want it. Right. And so that part of your personality is there. So there's going to be a large percentage of you right there. There's also going to be another part of you that is the nurturer, because you also have a very compassionate side to who you are. Okay. And so that may be your second, and your rigid would be the third, because you know how things are supposed to go. You try to be fluid, but yet when push comes to shove, you want it the way it's supposed to be done. Okay. I read people pretty fast. Okay. And so the others then become much less. It may be 5% or 10% of your personality. So notice that for each one of us, there's higher percentages and it gets progressively less. But what's important to me is that you do this without judgment. Without judging, oh, I should be more of this, so I should have less of this. No, you should have what you got. You know, and as we work on ourselves, we balance out some a little bit more. But it's more of I'm balancing to come from the higher self in this personality style rather than the lower self in this personality style, which is better than I want to change my personality. We don't. We can soften our personality, but we don't change it. You know, coming from Boston, in South Boston, sarcasm was an art form. And just to be sarcastic, people go into hysterics. And if somebody does something sarcastic to you, you do it even worse back to them. And it really becomes a joke. I moved to Connecticut where people are very prim and proper. And that was really poor behavior. And I thought, oh, cry, why did I come here? You know, they don't have a sense of humor down here. And so I softened that up. So my humor comes out when I'm with friends from home. We could go back into that again. But now that I'm down here, I'm a lady and I do that, you know, and I love it when I get together with real people and I can be a smart ass little sarcastic devil and everybody knows it's fun. It's not cruel. It's a joy. And so it's knowing who you are and we adapt it, but we don't ever change it.
That's why we get along, Dr. Dorothy.
Yeah. Life is such a gift, unless you believe it isn't. Life is such a gift. Is there anything else that I could answer, that I could add for you?
I'd like to just tell one story though, is, when you talked about the nurturer
Yeah,
and you tied it to the period of potty training,
yeah,
and, I just wanted to share a story. This is kind of a shout out to Carol Kitara. She does rest therapy.
yeah,
Yeah, and I did a process with her, and going through that process, I've been sort of dealing with this issues around boundaries and levels of
hmm,
anxiety, and so I went through this particular process. And through her process, it took me back to a story when I was a toddler and around uh, 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 potty training issues with some siblings, and the whole question around humiliation. And it just, being a pastor and being also in a nurturing situation, I can be nurturing at times. They also know that I could. This group kind of knows that I could very much also be somewhat of a smart ass. So it's kind of mixed in there, but it was really interesting to see that link that you had in terms of that stage, and also around the
yeah,
nurturer and the masochist, and that aspect of my life that really fit. I just wanted to kind of
yeah. Thank
share
you.
that.
Thank you for that. And
And
also
yeah,
notice that when people go into victim in that, resentment becomes a way of life. Resentment becomes a place you go. When people give far more than they're comfortable giving, and they're doing it because they're supposed to, and I put that in quotes, all right? When people give far more than they're supposed to give, they become resentful. And they
right.
do it, but they do it with resentment. And the receiver knows darn well you're doing it with resentment. And if there's somebody who continuously takes, I don't care what you give as long as you take care of them. But if there's somebody who's wounded because you gave it in resentment and they didn't need it that badly, but you didn't learn how to set boundaries. Because not knowing how to set boundaries is what happens when we're taught to always just be good, to never know what you need or want, but always take care of everybody else. And I believe that we are all here to support one another. I believe we are all in this together. We are all one, right? However, boundaries allows us to give from our fullness rather than give from depletion. Now, if we're in a crisis, God forbid, my girlfriends know, there's two close girlfriends. They can call me 3 a.m. if they're in a really bad place. I'm here for them. But the fact is, those are 2 girlfriends. I don't say to the whole world, call me anytime, day or night, I'll be here for you. No, I won't. That's crazy. I need my sleep. So find that balance. Take care of yourself and then have that boundary. Boundaries are an act of love for you, and they're an act of love for the other people in your life, because they know when you give, you're giving from fullness. They know you're giving because you know. When somebody knows how to say no, you can trust that when they say yes, they mean it. If somebody has no idea how to say no, you never know if you've asked for too much, because they're not going to tell you. It's a
And I
very
just want to make one last pitch before I'm going to take a
important.
little commercial time here. So also want to encourage people to download the Spiritual Life Foundation app. Here it is on my little phone. Okay, so download that. And when Dr. Dorothy started her talk, she started with something called "Everything is Energy," and so there's my little version of that words of wisdom. So but are there other questions? Do people have? Anyone else have any other questions? Uh, it's pretty late in Connecticut now. What time is it there?
Oh,
11.
don't worry about it. 11:36. I'm a wild woman. I'm a
Yeah,
wild
yeah,
woman. I
yeah,
can
yeah.
do this.
Okay. Does
Thank you.
anyone have any other questions or comments?
No, it was really good. Thank you for giving us that talk.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I appreciate that.
Sorry about the kitty.
Oh, don't worry about it.
Talk about demanding.
Um, I had my beautiful baby, and she was 16. She passed last year. My little
Oh,
black Himalayan. She was just exquisite. Yeah.
oh, yeah, I foster, so I
Yeah.
have a tub that's not mine, but this one is bottle fed. That's what she
Oh,
said.
no, mine was not bottle fed. Yeah, how lovely of you. That's cute. All right, if there's nothing more, I certainly do want to fill your needs while I'm here, if I can do so, please. And do truly, if there are questions and you don't want to ask, email me. I'm more than willing to be here for you. All righty? Okay, thanks so much. Have a great evening.
All right,
Thank
thank
Dr.
you.
Dorothy.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Too.
Bye.